team that started with all 4 members. There was another team that maybe just they cherry picked replacements, you know, got guys off SRT. It was really kind of sad.
That sounds good, Jess.
Oh,
Well, welcome on that note to the Elizabethtown City Council work session for August 26, 2019. And I would like to ask my friend, Councilman Matt Deneen, to lead us in the invocation. Mayor.
Could you join me in prayer? Father, we thank you for this day, the rain that's come our way. So we ask for your blessings on our city employees and all of our community, especially today, our city council as we make decisions that will affect all of us. Please be with us throughout this meeting, with us as we leave here. In Jesus' name,
Amen. If you face the flag,
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
to start us off, I would like to ask our city administrator, Ed Pope, to speak to us about North Crestwood. This will be the first of many topics that he's going to address, so shows how valuable he is to us.
I've got a lot of help tonight on all these. A couple of the first items are actually hopefully pretty brief with you all, just to make you aware of some actions we're going to ask you all to take in the future. The first is on North Crestwood. Maybe try to go out and locate that street.
I tried. I did find
It is the section of North Crestwood. It's actually on the east side of East Dixie. So that is the section we're talking about. The adjoining property owners, there are two adjoining property owner groups. This section actually is behind the former Bond Washington School. We have a proposal that has gone before the Planning Commission to increase some parking area for the use that is proposed in the area. And because this section of North Crestwood really does not function as any kind of connector street anymore, because back in 2000, the crossing that was at the railroad was closed by the railroad. Just a quick side note for those of you who weren't involved in the city at that time. When the state rebuilt New Glendale Road and made the connection to Hawkins Drive, the railroad told the highway department that they had to close 3 crossings in our community to get one new one. So North Crestwood is one of the crossings that was closed. Since that time, like I said, the street has really not functioned as much of a connector. There are no properties that really use this a lot for access. There's a single family residence on Dixie that uses this. And again, with the redevelopment of the former Bond Washington School, they would use it with the design of their parking lot. The closure of the right-of-way allows them to meet some of the city's design standards as far as the location of parking spaces on the site and landscaping and those requirements. There actually is, between the developer of that project and the adjoining property, which is owned by the Harvard Management Group, there is an agreement already between those two parties. If the council will take action to close the right of way for future upkeep and maintenance and cross-access easements and all that, they've already been working together on the project. So we hope to bring that to you all in the next 30 days or so for a closure. Like I said, it currently is a paved street, but it's really not used by anybody than 1 or 2 property owners that adjoin. If there are no questions on that one, I'll jump into Lakeview Drive. That right of way is proposed for closing. There are actually 4 property owners that adjoin this right of way. I'm sorry, I don't have individual maps, but I do have, the planning office provided me a copy of the preliminary subdivision plat that has been approved for this project. It will be a continuation of the Briarwood Forest development, and because of design of the lots and the street extension, they've requested that we close an existing right-of-way. The existing right-of-way is on paper only. There is no street out there. You could drive around the subdivision, and unless you specifically knew you were looking between two houses on Briarwood Circle, you probably would not find this right-of-way. It looks like a side yard between two property owners. So, all the property owners are in agreement, and like I said, that's a feat in and of itself, since there's 4 involved in this, but they have all signed the consent forms. We do have the description from the engineer on this project already. So we would propose, unless you all have some questions, that we present this and put it probably on your agenda for next week at the meeting. I know a couple of you who've been on the council for a little bit longer, this has been before you all and talked about a time or two in the past. This preliminary plat has actually gone through, I think, 2 or 3 different design changes, but it will, like I said, impact some of the adjoining pieces. The change, I guess, from the folks in one section of Briarwood Forest, actually all the access will come off through the new development, or the new section of the subdivision. So I don't know that there's anything else I can share on that one for you. If you have any questions, everybody understand where that one is. Okay, we'll jump in and talk about Pritchard Community Center. I'm going to give just a kind of bring us all up to date, so we're at the same, I guess, jumping off point for a discussion that we had this afternoon. And then Scott, if you all have some questions about the design or schedule that way, can hopefully respond to those for you. And I know the council has also asked about, are we looking at the fee structure down at the center in the future? And Seth can answer some of those questions for you too. But in general, I'm going to try to bring you up to date on where we're at and remind you all of a couple things. And this may be a good primer for all of us, and it is not intended to, if I get too basic on some of this, to go back too far, but as something I think we need to keep in mind, anytime the city does a public works project, and that's pretty broadly defined in state law. So I know here we think of public works and we think of Don's department and those kind of things, but it really does touch any kind of new construction, renovation to buildings that the city does. That's the broad definition of a public works project. And under one section of the KRS, anytime a city undertakes a project like that, we have to hire an engineer or an architect. And I know from past discussions, at times we struggle with that when we say, we're only building a building that's, 200 square feet. But state law tells us we have to go through this process to have a design professional to work with us on those kind of projects. So we're touching the Pritchard Community Center. We're doing a major renovation to a project. So one section of state law is going to tell us, city, you've got to go hire an architect or an engineer on this project. Because it does.
We can't use our own engineer?
We can, and on some smaller projects, I will tell you all, we have used our staff. There are some projects, though, that even, like I said, that's the broad stroke. Then narrowly, there are some projects that are going to tell us we specifically have to hire an architect. And in this case, because of the type of building that Pritchard is, under the Kentucky Building Code, the Kentucky Building Code tells us based on that use and the size of the building, we have to hire an architect. So in this case, where some smaller buildings, we may ask Scott or some of his staff or some of our other engineers on staff to help us with some design. In this case, because we're under the building code now, we have to hire an architect. So a little over a year ago, I know Virgil and Matt weren't on the council at the time, and the mayor was not the mayor at the time, but the city had a discussion about renovating the Pritchard Community Center. And we had a small scope of work for that project. At the time, we estimated somewhere between $350,000, $450,000. So, because again, it was touching a building, it was a public works project, we solicited proposals for architects. We hired an architect last summer after going through meetings and interviews with 4 or 5 of them. We hired Chris Cottengim, who actually, when he worked for Lewis and Henry, was the lead architect on this building. He's done work out at the Hardin County Library. He's done work for LaRue County. He does work in school systems. We're comfortable with him based on some past experiences we have had. So he was selected last August and to start working on this project for us. Chris got into meetings with the staff and their investigation of the codes and the requirements, and very quickly said, you all can't do what you're telling me you want to do for this price, and because you're doing some of this renovation, you're going to have to increase the scope a little bit. That's where we, with you all in the past, have had the discussions of making sure the restrooms are different and the number of fixtures we're having to add in there, and bringing some of those areas up to ADA compliance. So the scope increased on us from the original contract we had with him last year. Based on some of those general parameters, and Chris was even here, gave a presentation to you all on here's some different levels of things to look at. In the budget this year, the current budget we're working under, $2.3 million was placed in that budget to continue that project on. So we evaluated the scope of the project, what we need done. Like I said, that has increased in scope. So Chris's work and what he has to do for the city has increased. That's why we'd like to present to you all next week a change to that contract to put him under contract for additional money to finish the project based on the current scope. Like I said, at this point, if we want to talk in general terms about some of that scope or those kinds of things, Scott can answer those questions for you all. I will tell you in general terms, in continuing to work with Chris, before we go to bid, he'll be back before you, Scott will be back before you, and go over the scope of the project from a design standpoint and how we've had to move spaces or what we're doing and those kinds of things. I mean, we're not there yet, you all, because Chris hasn't done the drawings for us. So before I go any further, do you want to talk schedule or the scope or any questions that way? Because maybe Scott and I can tag team.
I just want to make sure on, where do we, are we going to lose some of the functionality down there, like weight room and things like that?
The current plan is, yes, to lose the weight room.
Okay, and what about the racquetball?
Racquetball will stay.
Yes, and then we'll still have meeting rooms out in the lobby area?
Yes, sir.
They'll just be redone, I guess.
Yeah, the meeting rooms, it's more cosmetic work. It's the main scope of the work is the bathroom, redoing the bathrooms, adding additional bathrooms, changing finishes, adding.
Not to cut you off, but where the weight room is now, are we making that another restroom?
Yes, sir. Yeah. And we've got some extra space there. We might, it's one of the parts we're looking at. We might add a warming kitchen in that area. That way both of the big rooms have a warming kitchen. So we can rent it to two different people at the same time and still have a warming kitchen. Again, that's on the table. It's just, like Ed said, we're still at the beginning stages of this, so.
Yeah, that's the only, I guess, caveat I would put to some of Scott's comments or any other questions you all have. I mean, asking us, oh, specifically, are we doing this? I mean, in general terms, I think we can respond to that, but again, until we get through this scope and the budget that you all gave us, I mean, we may work through this with Chris over the next 6 weeks or so and say, it's $3 million, and we're gonna say, we can't present that to the council. That's not how much money they gave us to work on this project. So staff-wise, we may have to make some adjustments, or we may come to you all and say, here's the number right now. We know we need to get X amount out of it, and here's 3 options for what we need to eliminate, and ask you all to pick up one of those 3 options to get us to a different number. But in general terms, yeah, there's gonna be some
I
change.
do want to clarify though on the budget, Ed. When we were talking about this, we never, or I never understood that we were approving, because that 2.3 million is the exact original design that he gave us, and we were back and forth on the weight room, we were back and forth on the fireplaces. There was a lot of things, and we said, well, we're gonna put some money in there, but we still need to sit down and redefine this a lot more. So then when we got the information that we're gonna hire an architect, that he's gonna go with this, my assumption is he's gonna give a design based on this $2.3 million original scope that he gave us. And I didn't understand it that way.
I will tell you from, and again, Scott can detail this more for you, but from the bidding environment that we're in right now, and from what we have in talking with some other communities across the state, I think from a staffing standpoint, we're going to make sure that that number is much lower than the general direction and the general numbers, just because of the environment that we're in. So again, you're right, that those numbers in that general scope that was given to you all a couple months ago, that we looked at the budget time period, we're still going to make some cuts in that, you all, because I mean, I think we have all talked in the direction that the mayor has given us is, you know, you've got to get, based on the bids we've received recently, you need to get a lower number, because if we think the estimate is 2.2, we're probably not going to do it based on, so, I mean, we may come back to you and say, guess what, we think we've got it down to a $1.7 million project, and now we're going to bid it and see what it's like. So, I mean, that's the only thing that I would tell you, Cindy, is I understand the scope was larger, but from the staff standpoint, we have heard from you all, and we've also got the direction from the mayor that this needs to be decreased, refined, defined, whatever.
We're starting it out based on that estimate you all got a few months ago at $2 million or less. That's the number we've kind of penciled in
Well, I
right
don't
now.
know that we actually got anything for 2 million, because I went through all my paperwork, and I only got the 2.3. Now, recently, you gave us, something that
Right,
has
but
2
like I said,
million.
the 2.3 is the number you all have. The
Right.
direction that the staff received from the mayor and Ed was 2 million or lower for those bidding reasons. So that's kind of the number we're shooting
Okay, then I have one more question. We paid him $43,000 when
at. We
he
have not
did.
paid him anything.
Okay, we had, well, that was.
That was the original,
somewhere.
the original
Didn't pay him
contract.
Anything?
The original contract was $43,000,
Right.
and we have not paid him any of that.
So he did all this work for free.
That was what was misunderstood.
Well,
Right.
it's not,
It was,
he's not doing it for free.
He'll bill
But is
us.
he getting 43 plus 100?
No, no, the total
Yeah, that's
is
what we-
121.
Okay.
So it went from 40, so we have a contract with him right now that you all approved in August of last year, I
Yeah.
believe. That was $43,000. We're asking for a change in scope up to the 121.
It's a nice guy, wait for his money that long. Okay, let me ask you one other
That's why he
thing.
has
The
a
professional
problem.
fees, aren't they based on a percentage of the project cost?
We,
Is that what I understood?
the project, most architects will look at it as a percentage, but we have always, the direction the council has always given us and the mayors have always given us is to get a fixed fee. So it is a fixed fee of $121,000,
Okay,
not a percentage of construction.
okay. So that's, here's 3 more questions. Then I'll- Okay, on the designs that we have right now, there's something called general conditions, the tax on 15%, which I don't understand what that is, and that's on all 3 different scopes that we have.
That is an estimate from the architect for how much the contractor charges for their general conditions. So that would be office trailer, management of the project, bathroom facilities if they have to provide them, all the general conditions that go into it.
Okay.
So it is, architects at this stage look at it as a percentage.
And that's just to help in estimating,
Right.
Cindy. I mean, he's not, I mean, like Scott said, I mean, he's got to give us some number because he's relying upon 23 projects he's designed and can tell you, okay, I know this carpet's going to cost this much, but there's their profit and overhead and other things they factor in.
That's in there, that's in there
Yeah.
separate. But general conditions would be,
So that's the add-on, because their profits built into what they're bidding,
yes.
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought so. And then owner's construction contingency, what's that?
That is how much he's estimating that we need to carry at this point for over and beyond what the construction cost is.
So an overrun on whatever the bids are.
Change orders,
Change orders.
we change our mind and want nicer carpet instead of, he gives us this grade and we go, no, we don't want that grade, we want this grade, and the carpet price goes up. That's all built into the owner's contingency. So that number, as we define the scope, that number gets smaller. Again, this is a pre-schematic budget estimate. So he's trying to tell us the ultimate number and how much it's gonna cost.
Okay. So in essence, he's gonna get paid for his prior work and then come up with something more definitive than what we already have, based on whatever information we give him, meaning no weight room, no fireplaces. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out what it is he's gonna draw that we don't already have.
He hasn't provided us any construction documents at this moment. All he's done is draw us.
It's just these drawings.
Yes,
That's
so
all.
we
Okay.
don't have construction documents that we can get to the planning department, and get a building permit to send out to contractors. That's all he's drawn at this point.
Well, then,
You got a fifth question.
It's my next question.
Okay. Do we have an option to do direct purchase of
He did on
materials on
this
this and save on sales tax?
We've done that on previous projects, yes.
Would you, is your thought process maybe to do that, since this is a large $2 million project?
I missed your question.
Direct purchase.
Direct purchase where we save on the sales tax?
I think all those options are on the table at this point. Yes, sir. I'll sit close.
Okay, the other aspect of the project that we've talked about is, that's right, a year or so from now, we're gonna have a nice new renovated facility. Again, the direction from the council and from the mayor has been, staff, you all need to look at all the fees you charge and make sure we are doing things properly and addressing things. Again, with the caveat being, we're not a private business, so, I mean, it is a community center. We're trying to address the citizens of our community, but don't tell us that the answer is we haven't looked at our fees in 20 years and we're still charging the same thing to play basketball that we did 35 years ago. So we understand that's been some of the charge to us also, is to look at that information. So Seth and his staff have begun doing that. Again, you can ask him some specific questions, but I will tell you in general terms, our plan is to come to you all sometime in September with some ideas on how we could make some adjustments at the community center with the staff's goal of having a new fee structure and all that in by the end of this calendar year. Okay, so before Scott finishes the drawings with Chris and it goes out to, or we selected the contractor and stuff, we hope to have that before you all, however procedure we need to do to adopt and change those to have that information. Now, like I said, Seth's already begun some work, so if you have some general questions about that, he can try to answer those for you too.
Well, I think first and foremost, I realize it's a community center and I know it's very important to our community. I also know it's the Red Cross shelter in the event that we have disaster. So it has to be a nice and a workable facility. But I guess my question is, and it is a community center, but I also realize there's a lot of people who use that facility that aren't necessarily city residents, because I know it's used a lot for wedding venues and stuff like that. And I think we have to be prudent in deciding if we're gonna spend $2.5 million, no matter what this comes in, we know it's gonna be more than what we think it's gonna be, because it always is that. Are we spending tax dollars the right way? And, you know, and are we getting the bang for our money by putting that kind of money in it?
No, I agree. The plan is definitely, we are looking at our fee structure. We are going to need to raise our rates. We have already almost completed a study where we're looking at other agencies across the state and looking at what they charge and how they go about doing that. There's several things that we're ready to talk about. It is better for us to go ahead and put this in place sooner than later because we do a year out in our bookings. So we're ready on our side to have a conversation very soon, and we've got most of that information ready to present to you all. So I agree 100%. We need to be prudent. We need to be still a community center and be able to afford all those opportunities. But we also need to look at our rates. They've not been raised in a very, very long time, if ever. So it's time. This is a great opportunity to talk about it.
Okay, other questions? Okay, if not, next week we'll put on the municipal order asking you all to sign the contract with 52, 53 architects so we can keep things moving, and we'll plan to, once we've done a little more design work, be before you all with some questions on design.
You're up again.
Turf bids, again, just, this is a general update for you all because this is a city project, but it's not a city project. Since it is at the Elizabethtown Sports Park, which is owned by the city of Elizabethtown. But we have an agreement with the Tourism Bureau that says you all take care of all the grounds, you do all the maintenance, you take care of the buildings. And guess what? If you want to do a capital improvement project out there, you got to use the restaurant tax, and you got to pay for it that way. And by the agreement, it says the Tourism Bureau must make the city aware of those projects. Okay, so they have to inform you, I think is the word that's used. During the budget process, again, Jana Clark came before you all and said, we're looking at a turf conversion project. We have set aside money to do that, and we'll keep you informed. So, because it is on city property, there is also a clause in the agreement between the city and tourism that says they have to follow all procurement procedures. So again, because they're doing a public works project, they've hired a company, they're using SFM to help manage and design the project. They have it out for bid, but because it's on city property, we made the decision for the advertisement to put the mayor's name on it. The bids are all going to the tourism office. They're due this Thursday. They're between SFM and tourism. They have done all the plans and specifications, and they have done these type of projects, from what I understand, all over the southern part of the US. So they did the general advertisement as required by state law. They've also reached out to different installers who do this kind of work. It will go to them, they'll open the bids, they'll review the bids, they will actually go to the tourism board for their review and approval. And then we suspect sometime next month, Jana may come here and say, we accepted the bids, this is what's going on. By our agreement, we're informing you, city, this is the project that's taking place. Now, they're gonna have to get some local permits from us because there's some electrical work that's probably gonna take place out there, so they're gonna get the local electrical permit from us. In some of the conversion, they're probably not gonna wanna run all the equipment through the main entrance and stuff, so they're probably gonna build a temporary entrance, so they're gonna deal with our engineering department and get an encroachment permit onto our city street. They'll have to get a EPSC permit from our stormwater department because they disturb the ground and those kind of things. So even though it's on city property, their contractor is gonna have to follow and meet all the laws and permits that are required. But it is not a city project, even though for advertising purposes, we did it that way. But they're gonna manage the contract, it's with them, it's coming out of their budget. There's no city general fund money going into any of this project. Does that help everybody? Okay, you're up there. The next one, I think I'm gonna sit down since Dee Dee and I are gonna talk about this one a little bit together. But I know the last couple meetings, we have tried to look at motions and proper protocol and those kind of things. And I apologize if the last meeting or so, it has seemed strange to you all. So what we did is we stepped back, we called Kentucky League of Cities, we talked to one of their staff attorneys who deals with city council meetings and ordinances and motions and those kind of things. We also talked to their certified parliamentarian on their staff to get proper procedure and follow everything. And this is what they have informed us on how we can operate. We can place an item on the agenda for you all that requires a vote. So we can put a municipal order, any kind of motion, a resolution, an ordinance, and we can simply list it on the agenda. The mayor can call that item, item number 6, read the municipal order, Dee Dee, for a contract with 5253 for architectural services down at Pritchard Community Center. Dee Dee can read the order. You all don't have to do a thing. So Dee Dee can read it. At that point in time, because it has been read and brought before the body, you all can have discussion on it all you want to. Don't have to make any kind of motions at all. Have all the discussion you want. At some point, the mayor, as the chair of the group, is going to look at it and say, okay, sounds like you're finished talking about this. Do I have a motion? And one of you all can then make whatever motion you want to deal with that issue. Or the mayor can say, okay, I think you've had enough discussion. I don't see anything more. I'll entertain a motion to adopt and approve that municipal order that was read to you all. And then somebody can just say, okay, then I'm making that motion, Mayor. I'll make the motion in a second. After the motion is made, before you vote, you can have more discussion if you want. Okay? I mean, just because it's the motion to adopt and gets a second, at that point, say, wait a minute, okay, we got a motion and a second. Before we vote, I want to talk about it some more. I mean, so you could stop after the motion and second. It's again on the table before you all. You all could have more discussion before you voted if you want to. I mean, hopefully if you have a discussion period and everybody says, yeah, we're ready for it, and you make the motion in a second, you'll just.
So that excludes motion to read.
Yes.
That is correct.
But it doesn't mean that we've been doing it wrong all this time. That was fine. It's just that they said we can.
Step it was the next
Yeah,
step.
just an extra
It's
step.
extra
So, you know, yeah.
step, it's not,
So, and, Chris Johnson, who's the KLC attorney, says, he said, I've seen, city council meetings all across the state, of course, and he said, everybody does it a little bit different, but as long as you are, you're doing, you're like having the discussion on the record, you making the motion in the second, having your vote, then that's the main thing. So, so if you all are okay with that, though, we'll probably put that, it's always a good idea to put our procedure to writing, and so, which is likely what we will, do, but if that sounds okay with you, I'll just remove the step, in the motion, the second to read.
the other thing that the mayor asked me to look into, he would like to add a public comment section to the agenda. And of course, there is a procedure and a process and requirement to do that too.
And what he means by that is just anybody that comes in and feels like they want to address the council for whatever reason, stormwater problem or road construction problem, whatever they want to come talk to, they can come to the city council
It doesn't
meeting.
have to be on the agenda.
You got it. I think everybody ought to have the opportunity to be able to come to the city council meeting and speak if they would like to.
However,
But you can control.
however,
If it's the same person, the same problem, everything.
to that end, what we can do, we can have a registration at the back of the table, the way we do now, where we have people signing. We can have a registration, and you have to list your name and the topic you wish to address to the council. And there is, and like I said, Pete said, we're gonna have to draw this policy up for you all to adopt. But you can limit how long somebody can speak to you. Most of the court cases have fallen out that if you give somebody 3 to 5 minutes, that seems to be a reasonable time period.
Because they can always come back, the formal agenda, if they need 20 minutes for a presentation.
Yes.
And Virgil asked about residency.
It appears that we can ask for their
Address.
And I say we get some big problem. He lives with houses.
We can't do that.
Well, you can't do that. You can ask for their address on the registration, but you cannot say, I'm sorry, Mr. Pope, you live out in the county, you cannot talk to me. No, you cannot do that. You can ask me where I live, and I can register that way, but if I want to speak to this public body, I have the right to speak
Because
to this public body.
what some people are gonna say is, well, I don't live in the city limits, but I work there and I pay occupational taxes, so I have the right to register. The council that I pay taxes, and they do. That makes sense?
They can own property.
Right.
Or you're right, they could own property here, but live in somewhere else. But we can ask name and address, and at this point in time, I think we will do that for you all, just to kind of help frame that discussion, so you have some reference of where that person is coming from to present to you all. But again, we're gonna have to, and it's not gonna be lengthy, you all, I promise, but we have to develop some kind of written policy statement that we'll probably ask you all to adopt through some kind of just motion and vote. And that way we can share it with the public and those kind of things.
And the thing is, if they come up and they want to speak about something that they've already been up here, becomes redundant, they've done it 2 or 3 times, and they're going to come on. If they have something new they want to speak about, then I think they should have that right. Personally.
Taxation, is that representation?
Ed, you got anything else?
Okay, I think I'm done.
One more thing, and you'll have the trifecta.
So, to make the announcement, our next regular meeting will be Tuesday, September 3rd, because Labor Day is September 2nd, so we're gonna move from that Monday to the following Tuesday there, September 3rd, and we'll have our regular meeting in the same place. And does anybody have any council remarks?
Sarah, good job on the break.
Oh, yeah, I meant
Yes,
to tell you
that
that.
was
That may be the best one that I've been to.
Great job.
That was outstanding.
Yes, it was. And Mark, Chief, thank you for getting us from one end of town to the other town without having to. We're right on the rack.
You almost poisoned the mayor from all that carpet. Rooms up and-
I had to get out of that seat and sit higher.
Why firemen always happy.
Thank you, Ed, good job. With that, we'll be adjourned.
Thank you.